Dane Brugler just released his top 50 players for the 2026 NFL Draft. And I got to say, good news for the Cowboys. We'll get into that next.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. Thank you for tuning in. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $300 in bonus bets when you win your first $5 bet. Welcome back. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. Check him out on Twitter at McCoolBCB. On today's show, we're taking a look at Dane Brugler's top 50 players for the 2026 NFL Draft. And I promise we're not doing this because the Cowboys are 3-5-1 and in 13th place in the NFC right now. We're doing this, Landon, because we've got an extra couple shows before the Cowboys play their next game on Monday Night Football. And I wanted to get into why this is important. Now, obviously, Dane he's a writer. He does some great work over The Athletic. But I wanted to give you some stats, Landon, about his previous top 50. Listen to this. Of his top 12 players last year, 7 of the 12 were drafted inside the top 12. Of his top 15 players, 11 were drafted inside the top 15. And of his top 32 players, 20 went in the first round. 2 other ones went back to school. That's a pretty good hit rate. And if you kind of project that forward to this year, this group of 50 players is going to give us a pretty good idea as who the top players are in next year's class.
Yeah, honestly, I mean, Dane's analysis and the beast that he releases every year is worth the price of the subscription for the Athletic every year. So, you guys, we're not going to spoil the article or anything. We're just going to talk generally about the people that are on it, not give anything away. But definitely check out that article. Yes, absolutely, Dane is. I mean, I think we agree the best in the business. I think most people inside the NFL kind of tend to agree.
We'll get him on the show here this offseason. Yeah. I want to talk about some of the players on this list. We know for the most part the Cowboys are going to be hunting defensive players in this upcoming draft. And defensive end is just a position that they're probably going to target. Dante Fowler and Jadeveon Clowney are both on one-year deals. So is James Houston. Sam Williams is on the last year of his deal. They need more edge rush help. And luckily, Landon, for the Cowboys, 9 of Dane's top 45 players are edge rushers. And if you include a certain hybrid linebacker from Ohio State, 10 of the top 45 are edge rushers.
Yeah, the bounty is deep at the position that you're looking to hunt. And the great news, too, is that it's varied, too. There's lots of different body types. So if you want to go towards the bigger type, like the Keldrick Falk, if you can get your hands on one of those guys, if you want the kind of like a little bit shorter, smaller speed rusher like a David Bailey or one of even smaller guys like that, like the kid out of OU, right? R. Mason
Thomas.
Thomas, yeah. Like I think, there's all different types. But there's a bunch of them that are all really talented at the top, kind of in the middle, and all levels. So that's great news for the Cowboys, because it doesn't mean that you necessarily have to use whatever is your first of the 2-round picks on the defensive end, because there's probably going to be a little bit of talent maybe lingering at the bottom of the first half as well.
So the top 2 edge rushers on Dane Brugler's board are Keldrick Falk from Auburn, 6'6", 270, and then Reuben Bain Jr. from Miami, 6'3", 275. These are 2 bigger defensive ends. Do you think that's what the Cowboys are going to be looking for this offseason, or does it not matter? Are they just going to try to go after the best available pass rusher?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's at this point it's probably best available pass rusher. It may work out that is a bigger bodied guy that's kind of more of the power end sized guy, right? I think they certainly could use either type. I think obviously Ezeraku is more of the smaller, shorter end, weak side defensive end. So if you're looking to kind of complement him as he steps into a bit bigger role next year, maybe you do go for a bigger body like Bain or Falk or the kid from Missouri as well. There's lots of those types in this draft. So and like I said, much like the overall depth, it spreads throughout the first round, it looks like.
Yeah, and if you're not familiar with any of these names, that's okay. We're still in the middle of the college football season. We'll get you ready as the draft goes on. But Keldrick Falk at Auburn, I know you're
War
I guess
Eagle.
a fan of him.
War
Yeah.
Eagle.
Yeah, there you go. He, I think, compares very favorably to Michael Williams, who we know the
Yeah.
Cowboys like last year that went one pick ahead of them. Again, 6'6", 270. He is the youngest player in the draft. So there's still a lot of development. This is not a guy that I think is going to come in and be, a Myles Garrett or anything like that. But there's a lot of traits that are intriguing here.
Yeah, he's frankly a classic Auburn player. I mean, one of the reasons I'm a long-suffering Auburn fan is because it feels like at times they play some of their players out of position. They have weird defenses that don't take advantage of all the talent that they get in. And Keldrick Falk has just been a guy that he's big, he's strong, so they've used him in a lot more of these kind of college formations that have 3 defensive linemen down. The mint tight kind of front stuff that you've seen that was kind of popularized by Saban back in the day. So he's playing like a 4-eye at times, like an inside of the tackle's shoulder, as opposed to outside, at like a 7 technique, like you would properly as a defensive end in most modern NFL defenses. So again, a kind of, and that was exact situation with Michael Williams as well, right? Where he was playing a little bit out of position. It was a little bit of a projection, but you knew that, this guy's just dripping with athletic talent, similarly sized, 6'6", 270. So it's a very easy comparison. And I imagine that he might have similar success in the NFL.
And Reuben Bain is a very similar player. Now, he's not quite as long as what Falk is, but he is a power end. The best comparison for him is like probably a Jared Verse, who came out a couple years ago from Florida State. I wanted to mention one other name here, and this guy's down a little bit. Cassius Howell from Texas A&M.
Yeah.
He was fantastic at Bowling Green in 2023, led the MAC in sacks, transferred to Texas A&M last year, and actually outproduced Shamar Stewart. He had 4 sacks last year. It was played really, really well on that defense that had a lot of talent. And then this year, through 9 games, he leads the SEC in sacks with 10.5. He's got 11.5 tackles for a loss. He's incredibly explosive. He can bend around the edge. But the reason why he's probably not going to be a top 10 pick, sub 31-inch arms, which is going to be an all-time outlier. How much do you care about arm length? Will probably depend on where you rank him in the draft.
Yeah, it was great, watching him last year. You definitely, caught glimpses of him when you were watching all the other guys on that defensive line. You're like, man, this guy's really good. Not even the NFL eligible yet or draft eligible yet. So, and he's a huge part of what A&M does. And A&M is one of the top teams in the country right now, and it's a lot because of what he does. And I think it's he's the kind of guy that it's really going to test the theory that I know John Owning, a friend of the show, is ready to put his gloves on for short arm pass rushers. So I think it's going to be an interesting argument that we're all going to get back into this offseason about the arm length and its value in this whole process.
I got one more that I wanted to mention because I know all the Texas Tech fans will be mad if I don't. Yeah. David Bailey, who's currently number 14 on Dane Brugler's board, which is right in the range in which we think Dallas will probably draft. Right now, he leads college football in pressures. He leads the Big 12 in sacks with 11.5. He leads the Big 12 in tackles for a loss. He's not overly big. He doesn't really stop the run. But if you want a guy that can get after the quarterback, he can do that.
He's better against the run, though. Not good yet, but he's gotten better. He has gotten better. There is improvement that to be made. He has a transfer from Stanford, one of the guys that kind of ended up at Texas Tech who really spent a bunch of money in the NIL, to get a bunch of guys to kind of come in and boost that program. And to their credit, a lot of teams did that, but Texas Tech, it worked really well. David Bailey was one of their big hits to get him. So I think he's a guy that could really be an explosive playmaker as a pass rusher. The only concern there is there a problem with having too many of this kind of size guys that are like close to Ezeraku, but you can't have enough good pass rushers on your team. So I would take the chance on it. No doubt.
I'll figure it out. Again, this is really good news for the Cowboys. We know they've got a clear need at defensive end. We're hoping Ezeraku can maybe soften that need a little bit, but you're going to want a long-term option opposite of him anyways. And with 9 and potentially 10 edge rushers in Dane Brugler's top 45, good spot for the Cowboys to be in. All right, let's talk about some more defensive players, including a linebacker who Dane Brugler has at number 1 overall. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. As the days get shorter and the nights come earlier, it can start to feel a little heavier, especially when life is already packed with work, family, and everything else. In this season, it is so important to reach out and check in with friends, family, and even yourself. Just checking in on a teammate or reconnecting with someone that you haven't seen in a while can lift your spirits. Reaching out for therapy can make a real difference too. And BetterHelp makes the first step easier by connecting you with a licensed therapist online from wherever you are. I know for me, like I love talking on the phone. I love calling some friends up, some family members up, even if it's for a couple, a couple of minutes. It makes you feel better. You're helping a buddy out, and it's the best way for you to kind of reconnect and re-energize. So this month, don't wait to reach out. Whether you're checking in on that friend or reaching out to a therapist yourself, BetterHelp makes it simple to take that first step. And listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/lockedon. That is BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon, because taking that step toward support might just leave you wondering, why didn't I do this sooner? Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We'd also like to thank you for making the Locked On Podcast Network the #1 sports podcast network. Elena, let's continue to dive in to this top 50. And I wanted to go to the linebacker position because that's another one where it's very easy to see the Cowboys selecting a linebacker in round one. You've got DeMarvion Overshown in 2026, coming off a major knee injury, entering the final year of his contract. We talked about Logan Wilson on yesterday's show. He might not be on this team. Kenneth Murray, Jack Sanborn, both on expiring contracts. Pretty good linebacker class.
Yeah, and it all kind of starts with two big athletic interior guys at Ohio State, right? We've intimated about Arvell Reese, and we've all talked about him privately. Anybody who's watching any kind of college football is talking a lot about Arvell Reese. So if you're unaware of who he is, get yourself familiar, because you're going to hear a lot about him in these coming few weeks. And you're certainly going to hear the comparisons to a player like Micah Parsons, because you're seeing a lot of this ability to come down as a pass rusher. He's good as an off-ball linebacker. He's just a pressure player who is all over the field, who can drop back into coverage. He can pressure the quarterback. I think, some people were hesitant early in the season to name him the #1 player. I think even Dane himself, who was, one of the early proponents of it, being an Ohio State guy, was kind of, hesitant just because of the positional value. But the truth of the matter is that if you wanted to put Arvell Reese as a full-time defensive end, he probably would be the best defensive end in the country. There's a reason that everyone kind of reluctantly, after seeing a couple more weeks of production, put him at the top, and I think he's earned it at this point.
I wouldn't be surprised if he's a top 3 pick in this class, but he's not the only linebacker that I think is going to rise up the draft boards. CJ Allen is currently Dane Brugler's #2 ranked linebacker, but I want to talk about Sonny Styles, who you mentioned from Ohio State. I happen to have a friend that got me some of the numbers from him during the spring. Listen to this. Okay. 6'0", so that's just under 6'4", 243 pounds, 4.38 40-yard dash. 20 years old, and he's a senior captain this year. And you watch him the last couple of weeks, and it's really starting to click for him. The kind of comparisons that I got from people are, it's like he's a bigger Ryan Shazier, who, if you remember correctly, the Cowboys wanted to draft Shazier over Zach Martin in that 2014 draft. There's just not very many linebackers out there with that kind of size, speed, athleticism. He's a captain. I would not be shocked if this is a top 15 pick, and honestly, would not be surprised if this is who Dallas takes.
It's crazy watching Ohio State's defense. I mean, just because they've got so much speed all over the place that it is kind of hard to gauge, right? In some ways, it's like everyone's getting to the football incredibly fast. And early on in the season, I think they only allowed like 1 touchdown and through six games or whatever it was. It's wild. So, I think the components of that defense obviously are making a huge difference. And I think, Matt Patricia's probably having the time of his life with these two guys, designing up all kinds of fun stuff. So yeah, it's been really cool to watch both of them.
Let's go to the defensive backs, because that's another position that the Cowboys are obviously looking at. And corner is a tricky one, because there are some talented corners in this class. Dane Brugler's got 3 inside of his top 4 inside of his top 25. The top cornerback, Jermod McCoy from Tennessee, has not played this year because of a torn ACL. And can the Cowboys use another high pick on a corner coming off of ACL? I don't know, but he's your top ranked guy.
I think the other thing that really strikes me about this list, I mean, there's talented guys. I mean, Avion Terrell, who is at Clemson, who's the younger brother, I'm pretty sure, of the corner out of Atlanta.
No chance the Cowboys draft him. The arms aren't long enough.
No, well, and that's my point. Actually, is that all these guys, including Jermod McCoy, who I think is probably the closest to you would feel like a slam dunk, first half of the first rounder talent wise, all of these guys are undersized corners, are certainly not meeting the thresholds that the Cowboys usually have at the position. So that's what makes it really interesting with this cornerback class, because you scroll down this list and maybe McCoy, and then maybe his running mate in Tennessee, Colton Hood, who's, kind of considered a fringe first rounder, just, basically in talk around town, is still kind of undersized. He's 6 foot, but like under 200 pounds. So there's lots of kind of talent here at the cornerback spot, but I don't know if they meet a lot of the thresholds that the Cowboys usually like at the position. I know that they've been bendy at sometimes, but are they willing to be bendy in the first round? That's another question.
It does feel like that's just going to be a position the Cowboys address, because it seems very unlikely that Trayvon Diggs is back in 2026. You've got Deron Bland, you've got Savon Ravel, but you kind of have this other massive hole at corner. You need more depth. And whether you do that in round one, remember, the Cowboys do not have a second round pick or a third round pick in this upcoming draft. You're kind of have to draft one of these guys early if you want a playmaker or a guy that's going to contribute right away. And like we said, it's a interesting class. I wanted to mention Caleb Downs, the top ranked safety in this class. Dane Brugler has him at number 3. Safeties, Landon, generally don't get drafted this high, but we've seen in previous years guys like Kyle Hamilton, Derwin James, Minkah Fitzpatrick. These are like highly ranked safeties. They all go outside the top 10 or 12 picks.
Yeah, and this guy definitely takes the kind of mantle from those guys. He is that classic guy who's been a front runner and has kept it up the entire time. He was the 5-star recruit coming out of high school, the number 1 rated safety, went to Alabama. His dad's a coach, an assistant coach in college, went to Alabama. Once Nick Saban left, he transferred to Ohio State. And so he's still really young. I think he's 20 years old, if I'm not mistaken. Yep. So yeah, and just been considered a top 5 pick since he stepped on field. He was the SEC Freshman of the Year, if I'm not mistaken, at Alabama. Yep. Just highly decorated along the way as just A+ every check along the way in his college career. So he's one of those types that you talk about as a top half of the first round, and the play reflects that too. He's a very dominant player. So he's one of the guys that you even though he's a safety, you consider him in the top half of the first round just because of what he can do to your defense.
And I generally don't like taking safeties that high, but he's a unique cat where he can play in the slot, he can play single high, he can play in the box. And the Cowboys safety position, Landon, is just up in the air right now. Donovan Wilson is on the last year of his deal. Malik Hooker has got I think a degenerative toe issue going on right now. And then just on Tuesday, the Cowboys put Wanye Thomas on the non-football injury list because of what he's going through with some migraines. Who knows how that situation plays out? I just wonder how much a top-end safety could solve a lot of their problems on the back end.
At this point, you look at where they're starting to fill the holes. You're starting to hope you get Quentin Williams. Obviously, you hopefully get an Overshown back coming this week. So you're starting to fill the holes in some of these spots. The spot where you really are going to need talent injection is in the defensive backfield. The question is, where is it going to come from at this point?
Yeah, I've got to believe it's going to be early in the draft. Would not be surprised at all if it's a linebacker and then maybe a safety in round 1, 2 positions that don't generally carry a ton of positional value, but that could come in and contribute right away for the Cowboys. Let's talk about some offensive playmakers, just in case the Cowboys don't bring back, a George Pickens or Javonte Williams. What does next year's draft look like? We'll get to that next. This episode is brought to you by Supply House. When the opening whistle blows on a new repair, get your crew moving forward with Supply House. Order today and see parts on your doorstep tomorrow. Over 280,000 plumbing, HVAC, and electrical items from the most trusted brands in the business. Their real-time inventory and honest lead times keep you from punting on projects, while their industry-leading customer service always has your blind side covered. And if you need parts fast for a project, Supply House has next day delivery. Talk about a game changer. So join the free Trade Master program today and score some serious perks like priority shipping, low prices, and a dedicated support line. Visit supplyhouse.com to sign up for free and use promo code SHNFL5 for 5% off your first order. That is supplyhouse.com. Real people, real service. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's not a better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game, or if you just want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score the next bucket to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late game push. And right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head over to FanDuel.com, sign up, and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL podcast. 2 shows every single day, one in the morning with Tyler Rowland, one in the afternoon with Tony Wiggins, available wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Landon, it seems unlikely that the Cowboys would spend an early round pick on offense, considering how bad the defense is. But you never know. So what positions would you be looking at on offense if the Cowboys went in that direction?
I mean, I guess offensive line, a tackle. If you feel like, I know, but I mean, look, you're making me choose an offensive player, and I just don't think that they're going to do this. But maybe a tackle that fell to them, they felt like it was a value that step in right away and take. Let's say you decide to move on from Terrence Steele, you're going to give Thomas an opportunity. And a tackle like I think it's Fanu, the
Spencer Fanu from Utah. Yeah.
If he fell to you at 20, or maybe you feel like I can't pass him up, right? So you draft him and you feel like you got to walk in starter at right tackle or something. Otherwise, you're really, if you don't like that answer, you're really not going to like my next answer, which is, I think, Jeremiah Love. If Jeremiah Love fell to you at 12, you have to, I think you start considering it. I
can't do this again.
I'm not, I'm just saying.
Go ahead.
Marcus, you started this segment wanting us to talk about offensive players. You're going to be upset about all these names that I say. Let's be honest. So we got to talk about the running back.
At least if we're talking about a receiver, like if you tell me the Cowboys franchise tag George Pickens and they traded him away for whatever, a second round pick, I can at least understand the argument of, hey, we just didn't want to pay 2 receivers $30+ million. We'll invest a first round pick in. We'll get Carnell Tate, right, from Ohio State, right. 6'3", 190, very similar build to George Pickens. And that way we're always kind of stacking these wide receiver contracts. I would at least understand the thought process. I can't do it at offensive tackle. They've invested so many resources into that position. I just can't do it.
That's fair. No, look, I think, to me, that's why I'm looking at more value situations that fall to you. But if you're going to go that route, like where Pickens gets you franchise him or trade him or something or whatever, you decide to move on from him, then I think the first round wide receiver becomes a very obvious answer and a very obvious pick. And I think it becomes honestly, if you decide to move on from Pickens, I think suddenly wide receiver becomes near the top of your needs at the list. So you got to replace it immediately. So I think you realize you need to replicate that kind of 2 wide receiver offense. So if Pickens isn't coming back, then wide receiver probably is going to have to be one of those first round picks.
And it is a good receiver class. I'm looking at the numbers right now. And Dane's got, I think, 7 receivers inside of his top 33. So while it doesn't have a Jamar Chase type of prospect, I think it's much better than last year's receiver class where it was Tetro McMillan, Emeka Buke, and then it was Matthew Golden. I don't think we had another receiver drafted until Luther Burden in the middle of round 2. You're going to have a lot more talent in this class.
Yeah, there's all types, right? And again, it's not a super high end class. I think Jordan Tyson is closest thing you have to those kind of top end guy, but he's not like that. He's not like a perennial top 5 pick necessarily type wide receiver. So but that doesn't mean that there isn't good talent, especially for what you're looking for, a high end wide receiver too. I think you got a couple of different guys that are coming out this year that can easily fill that role.
Any interest in a quarterback? Ty Simpson, number 2 overall. Fernando Mendoza, number 7 overall.
No. It's that's a little early.
I was talking to somebody that thought the Cowboys might have used one of their first round picks from Green Bay to draft a quarterback like in 2027. But now that you've traded that away, I see that seems pretty unlikely. So it seems like, to me, just looking at this class, this is going to be a very defensive heavy draft. I think the Cowboys are hoping that they can get 2 starters on defense with their 2 first round picks, and then add a couple guys in free agency, hope guys like Ravel and Ezra Raku develop. And that's how they get this defense back on track.
Yeah. And I think you're drafting for now. When this window's closed, then you can start going after your quarterback, and it's a rebuild at that point. You're tearing this whole thing down at that point.
You don't trade for Quinn Williams to rebuild. Like, you're trying to win in 2026 and 2027. So that's our expectation. And that's the show today. We'd like to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every single day. Find the show on YouTube, download the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms. Follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus _Mosher, and we will see you right back here tomorrow.